Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 24th and tonight's classic is Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby is one of the most critically acclaimed out of all 31 of these movies. Besides having a 99% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, it also had some nominations and awards at the Academy Awards, Golden Globes, and BAFTA. And 50 years later, I still think it holds up very well. I'm giving Rosemary's Baby an 8 out of 10. It was almost an excellent movie, except for one thing, and that was the ending. But I can't really get into that until the spoiler section of the video. Starring Mia Farrow as the titular Rosemary, this movie is about a couple who just moved into a new apartment, they have some new neighbors, and they start trying to have a child, but there are a lot of weird things every step in the way to the conception and the pregnancy. Eventually, Rosemary starts getting suspicious not only of the neighbors who seem oddly interested in the welfare of the child, but also even in her own husband. One massive plus to Rosemary's Baby is Mia Farrow as the lead. She completely knocks it out of the park with this performance. Oddly enough, this movie actually did win an Academy Award for acting, but not for her. The Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress was given to Ruth Gordon, who plays the old lady neighbor, and in all honesty, I have no idea why. Her performance wasn't bad, but there was nothing special about it. At all. If you ask me, I think that Mia Farrow should at the very least have gotten a nomination for Best Leading Actress if they were going to be giving out Academy Awards to this movie. Most of the best things about Rosemary's Baby are in Rosemary's character. Rosemary was relatable, nice, but had her limits. She definitely has kind of a passive-aggressive, almost snarky side to her, which was very entertaining, especially with some of the interactions between her and her husband. I really got invested in this character and wanted to see her win in the end. The plot, while kind of predictable, is told and paced very well in this movie. There's a lot of good turning points in the way the characters interact with each other, and a lot of things brought up that you don't think are important that turn into aha moments later on in the movie when you learn more. This movie has good dialogue, good storytelling, and a very strong lead. For most of the movie, it was done excellently. I just kind of had a problem with the ending. I'm not going to spoil it, but just overall, the ending was kind of predictable. It was the ending that you were kind of expecting. I was hoping that they would surprise me and do something else, but they didn't. And the whole movie is just kind of a downer, and the ending definitely continues with that theme. I know that this movie didn't have to have a happy ending, but it was kind of predictable in the way it continued sort of the depressing nature of the movie. And it's not even just the ending. There are other things in the movie that sort of contribute to this as well. At the end of it, you don't feel like accomplished or energized. This movie is kind of draining to watch. But still, that's very clearly what they were going for. This isn't supposed to be a story with a happy ending or even just a happy story in general, but it's told very well. And once again, Mia Farrow's performance as Rosemary grounds the entire movie. This is one of those classic old horror movies that I do think holds up very well to the test of time. It's probably just as good now as it was back then. It's far from perfect, but if you're interested, I would say check it out. I do think that this movie is worth a watch. Okay, now let's spoil the ending to Rosemary's Baby. Throughout the movie, she starts, on her own towards the end of it, but at first she's told by somebody else that the, old people that are their neighbors, they're really interested in the welfare of the baby, and they are very, very involved in the process of this pregnancy and stuff like that. The woman keeps, making her this special, vitamin drink every day. They give her, a good luck charm. They do a bunch of stuff to help her out. They also recommend a doctor that she goes to, and, the doctor says, "You can call me anytime, day or night. I want to help you." Anyway, she starts getting the idea from one of her friends who dies very mysteriously a little bit after that they are part of a coven, a group of witches, because it's not just them. They also have a bunch of other old people friends that they hang out with and also seem very interested in the welfare of the baby. Rosemary eventually starts forming the theory that this coven of witches is so interested in this child because they plan to take it away from her when it's born and use it for a sacrifice. Or something. I don't know what witches would do with babies, but it's probably not good. As she learns and uncovers more, she realizes that pretty much everybody is in on this. All the old people, even her husband. Apparently, the husband sort of made a deal with the coven to help them along with their schemes in exchange for helping him out in his career. There was a part, at about a third in the movie, where one of the people who auditioned for a part and the person who actually got it just suddenly went blind for no reason, freeing up the spot for him. They also have a friend from the beginning named Hutch, who they don't really see for a while, but a little bit into the pregnancy, he visits them, and he's kind of suspicious about the things that they tell him. And, like, out of the blue, like, wants to meet with Rosemary one day and says it's important, and I can't tell you exactly what I'm going to say now, and he never makes it, and it turns out that he was in a coma, and he stays in that coma for about 3 months and then just dies. So at this point, Rosemary can't trust anybody. She has to do whatever she can to save not only her own skin, but also save the life of her child. She tries her hardest, but at the end, the coven still manages to, like, bring her back to the house. She gives birth to the baby, and she never sees it. She was, like, unconscious for it, and they delivered it, and they took it away, and they told her that the baby was a stillborn. But she calls BS on that, and there's a bunch of very obvious signs that that is indeed the case, that the baby is not dead, and they just took it. And she finds a secret passageway. They were like next door neighbors, basically. Their houses were connected by a wall, and she finds a hole in the wall that leads to the old people's house. And she goes in with a knife and sees all of them sitting around in like the den or like the main area of the house with the baby in this black crib with an upside down cross hanging over it. And as it turns out, the scene where this baby was conceived, the woman gave them like chocolate mousse because they were like having like a nice night together of romance. They could make a baby. And the mousse apparently was like bad tasting to her. And that's because it was drugged. She like passed out. And then there was this really weird trippy like dream scene where it looks like a demon is having sex with her instead of her husband. But she brushes this off to just being a really bad nightmare. It was not. That was actually her husband possessed by the devil, and she gave birth to the Antichrist. She's angry and scared and just drained by the whole thing, but they tell her that that is still her child and they want her to raise the baby. And she goes up to it and looks at it. They mention that the baby has like weird, wrong-looking eyes, but we never actually see the child. And she like cries, but like it's implied that she accepts their offer and decides to raise the Antichrist, basically. That's where the movie stops. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly how things went in the book as well. But I didn't really like this ending. Not only was it kind of predictable, this definitely seemed like a very likely ending to how all this was going. I just didn't really like it. I was thinking about it, and there were two ideas I came up with as to alternate endings that aren't that different from the way the book went, but they're definitely different enough. There are probably reasons why I didn't do it, but there are two endings that I think would have been better. The first one is that once she finds out all of this, she realizes that she's been used the entire time, that her and her baby were nothing more than tools. She decides to get her last revenge on the coven. She takes the baby, and they're like up in like the 7th floor, and she jumps out the window and kills both her and the child. Because way at the beginning of this movie, the person who was implied to be the first mother to the Antichrist, she killed herself by jumping out the window, probably to kill both herself and the fetus. But this would have been like her final revenge against the coven, killing both herself and their Antichrist. The other ending is what I actually thought they were going to do for most of the movie. It's pretty clear from the like trippy, weird demon sex scene when the baby is conceived that she's going to give birth to the Antichrist. So what I thought they were going for was that she would think throughout most of the movie that the coven was just wanting to take the baby away from her. There's struggles, but at the very end, she manages to, like, I don't know, call the cops on them or something and get them all arrested, and she gets to keep the child. And it seems like a happy ending, but then we see more stuff revealing the fact that it's not over yet because that baby is the Antichrist. That's what I thought they were going for throughout most of the movie. I know this is nitpicky, but the ending really is important because that's the last thing I remember about a film. Still, even with the original ending, Rosemary's Baby is pretty good. This is definitely a classic for a reason, and if you want to see it, it gets a recommendation from me, even though I would have preferred a different ending. And that's a wrap for today's episode. I'll see you guys tomorrow.